There is a document that appeared on the Senate Legislative Council website at 11:47 last night. It stayed online for exactly 9 minutes before being pulled. But in those 9 minutes, 3 congressional researchers downloaded it. And what is inside that document explains why, at this very moment, the United States government is operating without a functional chain of command. I need you to subscribe to this channel immediately and turn on notifications, because what I am about to show you will not be on cable news. This is not speculation.
Enough
this
delays.
Is not analysis. This is documented constitutional
Get it done.
crisis unfolding in real time. Before I tell you what is in that document, you need to understand 3 things that happened in the last 18 hours that the media is not connecting. A security briefing that invoked continuity of government protocols, a market signal that only appears before wars or coups, and a legislative maneuver that allows Congress to bypass presidential authority entirely. These 3 things happened independently, but they are preparing for the same scenario: a president who cannot or will not be controlled by constitutional limits. Let me walk you through exactly what is happening. Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff convened an emergency meeting at the Pentagon. This was not on any public schedule. This was not announced to the press. But 3 defense officials confirmed the meeting happened, and they confirmed the specific phrase that was used: continuity of government protocols. Now, you need to understand what that phrase means. Continuity of government is the constitutional mechanism designed to preserve governmental function during catastrophic events: nuclear war, terrorist attacks. The last time this phrase was invoked was September 11th, 2001. It is not used casually. It is not used for routine briefings. When military leadership requests a review of continuity of government protocols, they are preparing for a scenario where normal chain of command might collapse. That meeting happened at 6 o'clock in the morning. 3.5 hours later, 9:30 a.m., the bond market opened. Treasury yields spiked immediately. Now, for most people, bond yields are abstract financial noise. But for institutional investors, they are a risk barometer. And Wednesday morning, something unprecedented happened. Goldman Sachs circulated an internal memo to major clients. The memo was leaked within hours. It contained one phrase that made every seasoned trader freeze: institutional risk assessment elevated to Category 4. Category 4 is the highest designation Goldman Sachs uses. It is reserved for 2 scenarios: war or coup. Not recession, not political uncertainty, war or coup. That memo circulated at 9:30 Wednesday morning. 4.5 hours after that, 2 o'clock p.m., Senate Majority Leadership invoked an obscure parliamentary procedure buried in Senate Rule 22. This rule allows the Senate, under specific emergency conditions, to fast-track legislation without presidential signature. The modification was filed quietly. No press release, no floor speech, just a procedural notation in the congressional record. But what it does is critical. It creates a pathway for Congress to act unilaterally if the executive branch becomes unresponsive or dangerous. 3 separate branches, 3 separate actions, all within 8 hours, all preparing for constitutional breakdown. Now, let me tell you what that 9-minute document actually said. The official title is Memorandum on Presidential Authority Limitations During National Security Emergencies. It was drafted by the Office of Senate Legal Counsel. This is a nonpartisan office staffed by constitutional lawyers whose job is to advise the Senate on legal boundaries of power. The document was issued at 11:47 Tuesday night. It was pulled from public access 9 minutes later after the White House counsel objected, but those 9 minutes were enough. The memo is divided into 4 sections. Section A is titled Constitutional Authority Analysis, and this is where it gets technical, but stay with me because the technicality is the point. The memo breaks down Article 1 versus Article 2 powers. Article 1 grants legislative authority to Congress. Article 2 grants executive authority to the president. But here's the question the memo addresses. When those 2 articles conflict, which one wins? The memo cites historical precedent going back 72 years, Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company versus Sawyer, 1952. This case is critical, and I need you to understand why. In 1952, President Truman tried to seize steel mills during the Korean War. His argument was national security. The country needed steel for the war effort. Workers were striking. Truman issued an executive order taking control of the mills. The Supreme Court said no. Even in wartime, even for national security, even with noble intentions, the president cannot act beyond constitutional authority. Congress controls commerce. Congress controls domestic policy. The president cannot simply declare an emergency and override that authority. That ruling has governed executive power for 7 decades. Every president since Truman has operated within those boundaries. This memo is citing Youngstown as precedent for the Senate to override presidential emergency declarations. Not advise, not consult, override. Section B addresses emergency powers curtailment. The specific language states the Senate retains authority to nullify emergency declarations by simple majority vote. Now, this directly contradicts the National Emergencies Act of 1976, which grants presidents broad discretion to declare emergencies. So you have competing legal frameworks. Which law supersedes? The memo argues that congressional authority under Article 1 cannot be permanently delegated away. Even if Congress passed a law giving presidents emergency powers, Congress retains the constitutional right to reclaim that authority at any time. But Section C is what caused the panic. Page 7, paragraph 4. I'm going to read you the exact language. In circumstances where executive actions threaten constitutional order, Congress possesses inherent authority to temporarily suspend military command transfer pending judicial review. Read that again slowly. Military command authority transfer. The Senate Legal Counsel is preparing a legal framework to remove the president's command of the armed forces. This is not hypothetical. This is not academic legal theory. This is an operational memo providing constitutional justification for Congress to take control of the military away from the commander-in-chief. That paragraph made the White House pull the document. But here is what nobody noticed in Section D. Section D contains a list, 14 names, all Foreign Service officers from the State Department Office of Legal Advisor. These are not political appointees. These are career professionals who interpret international law for the United States government. They have served under Republican and Democratic administrations. Some have been in their positions for 20 years. And on Wednesday, all 14 submitted resignation letters simultaneously. The Office of Legal Advisor does not resign. These are people who stay through transitions, through controversies, through partisan fights. Their job is to provide legal guidance regardless of who occupies the White House. When they resign together, they are sending a message. We cannot provide legal cover for what is coming. The State Department exodus was not the only bureaucratic revolt. At the Pentagon, Joint Staff lawyers circulated internal guidance Wednesday afternoon. The subject line read, "Distinguishing lawful from unlawful orders." Now, this is a document that exists in military legal training. Soldiers are taught that they have a duty to refuse illegal orders, but this guidance does not circulate during peacetime to senior military lawyers unless leadership anticipates receiving orders that might be illegal. The memo was not sent to junior officers. It was sent to flag officers and general counsel, the people who would have to decide whether to execute or refuse a presidential directive. That memo circulated Wednesday. Then came the intelligence community. 5 agencies simultaneously declined to provide the White House with access to sensitive compartmented information. The reason cited was concerns about appropriate handling. Let me translate that bureaucratic language. They do not trust the president with classified intelligence. When the CIA, NSA, DIA, and 2 other agencies independently decide to withhold information from the commander-in-chief, you are not watching political disagreement. You are watching the national security apparatus conclude that normal information sharing is too dangerous. The permanent government is protecting itself from the elected government. And this brings us to how Senate Republicans made their calculation. The meeting in Mitch McConnell's office Wednesday morning included 6 people, not 4. McConnell himself, who has 38 years of Senate institutional memory. John Thune, the minority whip, whose job is counting votes and knowing exactly where every senator stands. John Barrasso, the conference chair, who manages party messaging and controls what Republicans say publicly. John Cornyn from Texas, facing re-election in 2026 in a state that is trending purple. Mike Rounds from South Dakota, who sits on armed services and has a military background. And Susan Collins from Maine, who serves on the Intelligence Committee and receives classified briefings that most senators never see. Before this meeting happened, something else occurred Tuesday night that changed the entire calculus. The Senate Legal Counsel briefed Republican leadership on a topic that has never come up in modern Senate history: criminal liability for members who enable unconstitutional acts. The specific statute cited was Title 18, United States Code, Section 2384, seditious conspiracy. Now, this law is typically used against militia groups and domestic terrorists, but the legal counsel walked through a scenario. If senators vote to expand emergency powers and those powers are subsequently used to suspend elections or deploy military against civilians, and senators had reason to know those actions were being contemplated, they could face personal criminal liability, not political consequences, not losing elections, criminal prosecution. Let that sink in for a moment. Senate lawyers told Republican leadership that voting with Trump on emergency powers could make them personally legally culpable for whatever Trump does with those powers. This is not about primaries anymore. This is not about campaign donations. This is about senators calculating whether defending the president could land them in federal prison, and that calculation changes everything. McConnell opened the meeting by laying out 3 risk categories: political risk, electoral risk, and legal risk. Political risk, he said, we have managed for 8 years. Primaries, angry voters, Fox News attacks, we know how to survive that. Electoral risk is higher now. Polling shows Trump association costs us 6 to 8 points in swing states. But we have survived bad